Hello and welcome back. We've got such a great video for you. We're going to be cutting hair out on a complicated background, and we've got a new technique that we're going to be mastering as well. We're just going to real quick cut out our subject with a pen tool, and then when it comes to our subject's hair, we're going to be creating custom brushes basically that involve different strands of hair. So some will have dense hair, some will have fine hair. And then we're going to be using those custom brushes in our second part of this video. We're going to be using the pen tool to create paths and then stroke those paths with the brush tool. I know it sounds a little bit complex, but by the time we're done, you're going to be a master. We got a great video. Let's jump into Photoshop. Here in Photoshop, we're going to open up. We're in Chapter 3, Section 4. Let's go ahead and cut out hair on a complicated background. Now, I just wanted to choose this image for a couple of reasons. One, we have a lot of flyaway hairs and things like that we want to take care of. The other reason is, the hair that we want to cut out is pretty much the same color as the background in a lot of these areas. This is a relatively difficult thing to do, cut out this hair, and we've got a great technique. So we're going to just start this off. I'm going to use the pen tool to cut out the majority of our subject, and we're just going to go super quick with this, and then we'll get into creating the brushes for our subject's hair. So we just did a rough outline of our subject using the pen tool. Let's go ahead and right click. I'm still using my pen tool here. We're going to right click and go down to Make Selection. Let's feather that by 1 pixel just to soften the edge up a little bit. Hit OK. And we're going to click on our layer mask. There we go. Now you can see when we have hard edges like around our scooter and our subject, the pen tool really does a fantastic job. Not going to work so well for hair. Let's grab a solid color fill layer. We're just going to go to white and we'll put this right underneath our subject. Now, just for 1 second, let's zoom in to our subject here. I'm going to hold Shift and click on our layer mask. And let's take a look at kind of what we have with our hair. Now, we've used many different techniques to cut out hair, including using the brush tool. In previous sections, we've painted individual strands with the brush tool. Now we're going to get a little bit more complex, and we're going to be creating multiple strands with the brush tool, and we're going to combine that with the pen tool to get a little bit more accuracy. Now, this is also great for anyone who's not using a tablet. You'll be able to get great results using a mouse. What we're going to do is basically create multiple different strands of hair, and then I'm going to include all that into a brush. And we want different densities of hair as well. So let's go ahead and start by creating our custom brushes, and then in the next video we're going to bring it together and then use those custom brushes to actually wind up painting the hair. So to start off with, what we're going to do is I'm just going to make this layer invisible. The layer with my subject we're going to make invisible. We're going to create a new layer, and I'm going to use my brush tool. Now let's just hit B for the brush tool. We want our hardness to be about 50%. There we go. And we're going to choose a small size here. You can follow along with me if you'd like for this section. We're also going to be including all of these brushes in your download, so you can just go for that if you'd like. What we're going to do here is basically I want individual hairs to show up as just dots, okay? So we're going to make some dots, and you're going to see I kind of want these to be different sizes. Some of these dots I want to be a little bit larger. Some of these dots we want to be a little bit smaller. There we go. I'm on a new layer here, by the way. And this is what I would consider to be a pretty dense grouping of hair. Okay, it doesn't look like hair at this point, but it will. There we are. So let's go ahead and start off with that. Now this is a little bit of a guess and check type of thing. So we'll start off here and see how it looks. We have a white background and black dots. I'm going to hit M for my marquee tool. Let's just make a selection around all of our dots. we're going to go to Edit and down to Define Brush Preset. Okay. We're just going to call this Hair Cluster 01 and hit OK. Now, just to see if this works, let's deselect, Control or Command D. We're going to make that layer invisible for right now and create a new layer. Now, as I paint around, what we're seeing is this cluster of dots really does not look like hair at all. We're going to open up our custom brush menu, and a couple of tweaks, it's going to start to look like hair. So right now, it just looks like a bunch of dots. If we go to Window and down to our brush settings, the first thing that I'd like to do is make these dots closer together. So we're going to take our spacing and bring this down to 1%. There we go. Now 1%, we can see these dots are closer together, and for the most part we're starting to look like hair. Let's just make our brush a little bit smaller and see what happens when we paint with that. There we go. You can see, even let's go ahead and zoom into 100%, we're looking pretty good. So these dots are all closer together, and now they're individual hairs. Pretty cool. Now, we want this to perform like hair as well. So we're going to turn on our shape dynamics, and here where we see size jitter, we're going to take the controlled pen pressure. So the less hard that I press, now I am using a tablet here, we're going to be using similar technique here without a tablet. The less hard that I press, the closer they are together, and the harder I press, the farther they separate out. Okay, so this is a relatively dense gathering of hair. And there we are, and that's looking pretty good. Now we're also going to turn transfer on. There we are, and we're going to have the flow jitter. There we go. The control is going to be pen pressure, so the lighter I press, the less we're actually going to wind up painting, and the harder it's going to get darker and darker and darker. There we go, and I'm going to just put a little bit of jitter in there anyway, so it just kind of winds up changing a little bit. Again, we want variation, but you can see here we're painting with something that actually starts to look like hair, which is really great. So now we're ready to save this brush out. It looks really good. So we've got our brush tip shape in there, we've got our shape dynamics, and our transfer. Let's go to our menu here. Earlier when we went to Edit and Define Brush Preset, that defined the shape of the brush. Now, because we put in all of our settings, the shape dynamics and the transfer and our spacing, that kind of takes the shape of the brush and brings it to another level. So we need to save that out. So we're going to go ahead here to New Brush Preset, and we're just going to call this Hair Group 01 and hit enter there. So we're in Hair Group 01. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a few different variations of this, because you can see this hair is relatively dense. There we go. There's a lot of hair and a lot of size, a lot of difference in size there. So let's go ahead and select this out. Now we're just going to do this a couple of times. We'll bring that layer back visible again. Okay. And alright, we'll bring our hardness back to about 50%. Make our brush nice and small. And then we're going to do another variation here. And with this variation, we'll just do a little bit less dense. Okay? So let's go ahead and define this. Same like we did before. Edit, we're going to define a brush preset. I'm going to wind up deleting these in a minute, so it doesn't really matter what we call them. We're going to bring our spacing down, turn our shape dynamics on. Okay, we want our size jitter to be on pen pressure, and we want our transfer, and we're going to bring in some flow jitter as well. Okay, and now we'll just make our brush a little bit smaller, and you can see we have a slightly different hair. So we're going to save this out too. New brush preset. All right, Hair Group 02. So I'm just going to keep doing this a couple different. There we are. Let's just right click there, just go right back to a normal brush and then get it to our settings. Just a little bit of a smaller cluster there. And we're going to define this as well. The reason we're doing this is that different hair is going to display a little bit differently. So I just want to make sure that we have some options. Alright, let's go ahead and turn on our shape dynamics. Size jitter is going to be, there we are. Bring our spacing down and turn our transfer up just a little bit. So you can see we have a little bit of a finer hair there. Alright. So now we kind of get the idea. Let's right click and we see we have a few different options. So I'm going to actually go to this little guy here. We're going to go to our preset manager. Okay. Now you can get to your preset manager a couple of ways. You can go to edit, down to presets and preset manager. And here at the top we're looking at brushes. Now I'm going to click on this little menu item and we're going to change this to a large list so I can actually see what we're doing. So I can see we have this hair cluster 1. So for instance, if I just click on this hair cluster 1, that's just those little dots that I made. Now the group that I made, that's the actual different hair. So what I'm going to do is actually delete these clusters, okay? Because we just need the groups, and we can rename them if we want. So let's delete hair cluster 1. There we go. Let's delete cluster 2, and we're going to delete cluster 3. Okay. So now we have hair group 1, hair group 2, and hair group 3. Let's go ahead and hit done there. Alright, and on our layer, we're going to right click, and you can see here on the bottom of our brush menu, we have hair group 1. Okay, so this is what hair group 1 looks like. Right click, this is our hair group 2. There we go, and right click, this is hair group 3. So you can see we just have slightly different types of hair for each of these. Now, we can most definitely go in here and change these settings and continue to make more of these brushes as we need to, but we're going to just start with here. So kind of like, you know, light, airy hair, a little bit more dense, and just kind of a little bit on the scattered side. So this is actually a really good place to start. Now, I'm going to wind up including more brushes with the download, and it's super easy to load these in. So when it comes time to the download, just go to Edit, down to Presets, go to your Preset Manager, and you can just go to Load right here, and in your Photoshop brushes, you're going to see they're going to be included in here as well. Okay? And when this tutorial is done, I'll just kind of make more of those brushes. It's going to make this easier for you. Well, that's kind of the idea. So we have those brushes. You can always just grab your pen tablet or your mouse or your trackpad and just paint with those brushes, and that's totally acceptable. You get a little bit more control when you actually use the pen tool to define the shape of the hair, and then you can let the brush kind of like do its thing. And I know it sounds a little bit complicated, but in our next video, we're going to show you how it's done. It's going to be really, really cool. Basically, we'll be able to trace individual strands and then fill them in with these brushes that we just made. Thanks so much. We'll see you in the next video.